raise our vibration just by being in that presence, and also to learn strategies and tools to get through it in the way of finding the path of least resistance, like Abraham would, because from their perspective, it's just, how do we move through life with more ease and grace? And my intention for an audience is for them to be uplifted and for them to be inspired and for them to find ways to connect, to unlock their personal power, to find meaning in all of life's circumstances. And I'm not immune. I go through crazy, horrible experiences as well. And I go through loss and grief. And even as a channel doesn't mean I'm immune to that. It just means
no, absolutely not. I think sometimes it's very naive for people to be actually putting us on a pedestal or putting anyone that is so energetically gifted on a pedestal, because we're still human and we are still going through all of the elements that create that inspiration. Because if we didn't go through the grief, if we didn't go through the hardship, if we didn't go through the challenges, then we're not authorities on it, because people look at us and go, well, they've lived a life of rainbows and butterflies. How would they know what I'm going through? It absolutely is. And, I just want to also just bring up what you said about Anya, your spiritual guide, and that intuitive channel that comes through you, and the fact that you do not get energetically.
My name is Terri Messenger, and I am
Hey, and welcome to Terri Messenger's Genius Zone. And this is the place and the space where you are going to get your own free masterclass, absolutely free. Hey guys, we are ready to drop one of the most spiritual, the most intuitive podcasts that I have done in my 3 years of being a podcaster. Now, on this show, we are going to tap into the superconscious. We are going to allow you to know how to heal grief, sickness, trauma, or any of those elements through a very powerful and profound modality where Lisa Brandis channels. She channels her guide called Anya. Now, if you know of Esther Hicks is a profound intuitive healer. She follows and does a very similar spiritual modality. Now, for those of you who follow my journey, you may know that I have a lot of grief that is happening in my life as I am on this journey with my husband through vascular dementia. One of the hardest, most difficult times of my life. And she channels, she calls in Anya, and what she says to me is absolutely profound. So here we go, starting off about how hypnotherapists and these kind of spiritual guides, anyone who can tap into the superconscious, have a huge advantage of healing people at the speed of light. And you're about to find out why. So sit back, tune in to Terri Messenger's Genius Zone, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side.
profit, right? They just have it like hypnotherapy. We call it tapping into the, super conscious. It's still, we just find different labels and words that allow us. It's like meditations now called mindfulness, right? It's still the same practice, just given a different terminology.
Yes, and I think too that when people are choosing their journey, and whether it is Reiki, whether it is channeling, whether it is, whatever it is, that higher consciousness is really what we're talking about here. And what I want to do now, Lisa, is I want to move towards your spiritual awakening, because I feel that this is a really big part of what our listeners are going to hear, because a spiritual awakening is a very, very powerful revelation that everyone is entitled to and everyone can have. However, let's hear about your spiritual awakening and what was happening for you when that turning point and everything changed.
My biggest one was when I came out of the spiritual closet. So I'd had a medium say to me, go sit in a mediumship circle, learn how to develop this skill set. So I knew through my Reiki Master that I was aware of spirit. I'd remembered as a child I'd connected to spirit, but I had a lot of fear. And so I initially went on the journey like many people and studied psychic mediumship, which was, so for those of you that don't know the difference, a psychic medium is able to connect to our loved ones that have passed over and bring messages through like on a telephone. You're a medium. So the word medium is like, we can tune into the spirit realm, we can get a message, we interpret the message, and then we deliver it to the person, and then we help them to understand it. So we're like a bridge between heaven and earth, if you like. So I loved it. I loved mediumship. I loved the development of it. I sat in a circle where we met every week for like 4 years. This is on top of the 2 years one-on-one that I'd done with my Reiki Master in terms of my own development. But I was taught that Reiki is a hands-on healing modality. I loved Reiki. I loved it so much because the minute I put my hands on someone, the world to spirit opened up for me. So it was like I'd found a magic key to unlock the door to spirit. So, you talk about, is there a process to channel? For me, it's just doing Reiki. It gets my head out of the way. And I am very logical, and I'm a seeker for truth. So my actual personality is very interested in truth and wanting to understand and digest what's going on versus, so I have two splits of my personality, one that's very intuitive and creative, one that's very logical and driven. And so I was aware and practicing mediumship, learning it, but I never quite sat in comfort with being a psychic medium. I didn't really want to just communicate with those that had passed on. And in my early years, my experience was that there's a lot of grief that you have to sit with and hold in order to help people, because quite often they're wanting messages from their loved ones. They're feeling that sense of loss. And on the other side, I developed this ability as a healer, which was all about life and living versus death and dying. And I kind of loved healing because it was about, and then I became a clinical hypnotherapist like you. So it was about, how do we take life and become the best of and become the happiest in and thrive in life, which to me was more important than living for the beyond. Like it was about, my dog's just scratching the carpet in the background. It was about, how do we make this life the best it can be? And so coming out of the spiritual closet was, I was secretly giving readings or delivering messages while I was giving someone a healing session. Yet the modality of Reiki was always seen as a passive modality. Sorry, Jeff.
We don't mind here because it's like an anchor. So you hear the dog scratching, but we don't know the dog is scratching. We just hear your voice and what you're saying, and the sound of what's happening in the background is really just anchoring it in. And sometimes it helps us to actually remember. So please, don't feel in the slightest bit concerned about that. So Lisa,
it is real life, isn't it? He's a Kelpie, so he always likes to be right under my feet.
Yes. So then, your spiritual awakening. So your spiritual awakening really began when, because I always say it's a turning point. It's a time. You mentioned to me that you lost someone, and that that person, where you were in an acting career. And, you know, I love that unity that you and I have got. And, you know, you went on to nearly becoming a person with All Saints, like the show All Saints, which is, by the way, for people that are overseas, All Saints was a very, very popular series here in Australia. And, you know, you came so close to doing that. But all of a sudden, alas, someone very relevant to you, a friend, had actually passed. So can you talk about how that sort of directed your journey from there? Because obviously that was a devastation and a time for you that was very difficult.
It was, and for me, the other, I guess the biggest turning point was understanding that I could connect with spirit. So when I lost I worked at Starlight, so one of the children had passed away, and going back in time, back to when I first learnt Reiki, I had an experience where I was able to connect with him, which kind of started that development of the mediumship skill. And what I realized is that because I'd seen and felt his presence, I no longer carried the grief because I knew he was okay. And when I went back into the Starlight room and all the kids were crying and everyone was upset, there was this an experience of peace and a certainty that I know that when we reemerge into non-physical, it is a change of state, but life continues. Love never dies is what I know now to be true. It's a knowing. And so that was part of that first initial turning point. And I realized that I just didn't want to focus on myself anymore. Reiki had taught me, I became a Reiki healer, and Reiki really taught me about the value of humility versus acting. Felt very much about me and about proving myself. I wanted to get to know who I was as a human. I wanted to start to learn to love myself. And so mediumship, spirituality, the development of that all began from that place. And I literally kind of turned my back on Reiki, started to become the healer, and then went on to become a Reiki Master and went on to teach thousands of students worldwide Reiki. But the biggest turning point, Terri, came for me when I came out of the spiritual closet, because I recognized that I wasn't doing Reiki passively. When I did Reiki, I did it with, it was like a medium, a psychic medium, doing readings and giving Reiki healing at the same time. And I remember a friend saying to me, my business coach at the time, saying, well, I think I said, what is it that you do? I'm like, well, it's intuitive Reiki. It's not just Reiki, it's intuitive Reiki. And when I remember putting, like she said to me, well, tell everyone. I'm like, I can't. I was so scared of being wrong or doing it differently or not fitting in. And I literally had this fear that if I say I'm an intuitive Reiki healer, that I'd be condemned and told you can't do it that way. Reiki's in silence. It's like you're a psychic medium or you're a healer. The two can't mix. And I was encouraged to put it out on Facebook. And I remember saying I'm an intuitive Reiki Master. And what do you think happened, Terri? Do you think I got condemned or shut down? What do you think happened in that moment?
Well, you know, one thing I do know is you differentiating, for starters, between one or the other. I completely feel that, you know, people may shut you down, and even if they do, it can happen to the best of us. But if that happens, you know, it's usually because we're a threat. But on the other side of the fence, when people need it and when people are going, wow, this is amazing, this is incredible, I want to be in that space where this beautiful lady can not only, you know, tap in to that spiritual world, but she can do Reiki. So I actually know very well with that, because I, as a content creator, I just bring everything together. So I believe that it could have gone either way, but there could have been a lot of people who needed you and were praying for you.
That's exactly what happened. The minute I stopped holding myself back, the only person that was scared and critical of me was myself. It was my fear.
Yes.
And once I had the courage to step out and say, this is who I am, and own who I am, and I was inundated with people. Like, I couldn't keep up with the demand. It just was unbelievable. Like, overnight, I just had students coming in, everyone going, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I do. That's how I do it. And it was like, when I gave myself permission to do Reiki in this different way, I also gave everyone else permission as well. So it normalized intuition as part of healing. So
you talk about the mediumship side of it, which I can really understand. In fact, I have been in one of your sessions, and I was really impressed with, you know, what you did for me, because it wasn't about anyone who moved on into the other side, but it was about a crisis that I'm currently in, which is a very spiritual crisis with my husband, as he has shockingly moved into vascular dementia. And it has been such a diabolical crash that he has shocked the community. And whilst, you do go through a sense of grief, you go through that long goodbye, because they suddenly become a different person. And you literally tapped in to where he was in his absolute, because this man, his spirituality, he is a chiropractor, and he also does Reiki by default. And do you know what? That the spiritual realm has brought him into so much joy, and you picked that. And I just wish that I had recorded that. And so for me, it was a confirmation that, firstly, you are right, because he's still alive. So, you were talking about how he goes in and out of consciousness, how he has favor, and how he has joy. And you could not have hit it on the head any better. I've paraphrased what you've said, but that's exactly what, your spirit, Anya, had told me. So I can really understand, Lisa, how you bring a lot of peace to people who have actually lost loved ones. But let's talk about it from the other side now, because you've helped a lot of people. And I do notice in that class, it was very, very sad, but a woman had spoken up who had lung cancer. And obviously she must be in a world of fear. So coming to you must give her an insight. Not that you're depicting her future, because you're not.
And the funny thing is, that's what I love about channeling. So channeling is a different experience to mediumship and spirituality, and one that to me is always uplifting. So I myself as a human would judge that, and my husband had cancer. So I certainly know very personally what it's like to go through that experience. Luckily for us, he's yesterday actually 17 years cancer-free. He wouldn't let me say he was in remission. He's like, no, it's cancer-free. And he had leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia. Yeah,
I cannot agree with that more. So for that woman, obviously, I didn't know her. I'm not you. And obviously she had a lot of faith in you, because she told me that, and she called it Anya. She said, Anya has really tapped into where I am. But let's open up, what you have actually done for, specific clients, where they've been before they've come into your, your beautiful gift mix, and, what you are able to do for them. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, I think there's just one thing I want to share about the state of channeling. Like, we can all do it. It's a bit like going into a trance state for hypnotherapists. we all enter into that pure state. And when I'm looking over an audience and I'm blended with Anya, who the best way to describe her is a collective of spiritual energy, and she transmits messages through me, and then through my consciousness the message is delivered to the audience. But when I'm in that state and blending with the person that I'm connecting with, I don't ever feel judgment or pain, because they see things from, there's no judgment, there's no right or wrong, good or bad. There's love and compassion, but there's not even empathy. Does that make sense? Because empathy is almost a blending with and a feeling sorry for. There's just every state, every experience we have in the human physical form is interesting to the spirit beings I work with. So they see it as a possibility of, what do we learn from that experience? Who do we become? Who do we meet? And the fear that the human might be feeling, Anya doesn't feel it. She takes them from where they're at, which might be a feeling of terror. Like, she may be terrified. I don't know, because I didn't feel it and I don't remember. But what she does is she gives them an empowered way to look at that situation she's about to embark upon, and gives strategies and tools to get through it in the way of finding the path of least resistance, like Abraham would. Because from their perspective, it's just, how do we move through life with more ease and grace? And my intention for an audience is for them to be uplifted, and for them to be inspired, and for them to find ways to connect, to unlock their personal power, to find meaning in all of life's circumstances. And I'm not immune. I go through crazy, horrible experiences as well. And I go through loss and grief. And even as a channel doesn't mean I'm immune to that. It just means
no, absolutely not. I think sometimes it's very naive for people to be actually putting us on a pedestal, or putting anyone that is so energetically gifted on a pedestal, because we're still human, and we are still going through all of the elements that create that inspiration. Because if we didn't go through the grief, if we didn't go through the hardship, if we didn't go through the challenges, then we're not authorities on it, because people look at us and go, well, they've lived a life of rainbows and butterflies. How do they know what I'm going through? It absolutely is. And, I just want to also just bring up what you said about Anya, your spiritual guide, and that intuitive channel that comes through you, and the fact that you do not get energetically depleted. I feel that is a really relevant for people that want to come into your world and be trained by you. For people who want to actually understand, what they can bring, because a lot of people are fearful of being in that energetic slime where they feel that they may get pulled down and worn out and exhausted. However, what Lisa has just explained is outside of the human dimension, where I understand that very well, because we move out of it and we objectively look in so that we can do that healing. So give us an example of one of your clients. You don't have to mention their name, but just so our listeners can really understand what they were going through and how you helped them, and what the whole element of, whether it was Reiki and together with channeling, what it did for them.
Oh, gosh, I've got so many different stories. And just the one thing I want to add on that is that what Anya has taught me is that there's only love. That even our fear is lovable, even our shame. When the reason as healers we have gone through our own level and our own awakening. What that means is we've gone through our experiences, and there's a desire to want to heal ourselves, and we're always on that journey. It never ends. We're always having chaos hit, and then we're becoming more and more of our true essence, which is unconditional love, and learning to love ourselves and others. And so the more we do this work, the longer we've been working on ourselves, the more we're able to hold that level of capacity of love for self and others. And then that's why that no matter what stage you're at, I remember a beautiful man coming to one of my Reiki workshops, and he was in his 50s. And I remember we did the attunement to Reiki. I do it now online, and it's just as powerful as when it was in person. And when they're attuned to the essence and the energy of Reiki, what it does is it opens a spiritual vortex for them to connect with their own personal power. Like Reiki is universal life force energy. It taps them back into what they already are. It blows past the amnesia that we're a spiritual being. And he was connected to that. And now this man was such a beautiful man. He took in teenagers. So he was a, what are they called when they take on teenagers for a particular time to live with them?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
There is basically took troubled teenagers in. Yeah, and you know, helped them. So he was just a beautiful, humble man. And I said to him at the end, I said, what was the attunement experience? And there was about 4 or 5 women standing around him. He's a big bloke. And he looked and he just went, I think that's the first time I've ever felt loved, like really loved. And then he said, I'm worthy of being loved. And then he, you know, his eyes welled up, and we're all like, whoa, like we're all crying because it was so beautiful. And his absolute vulnerable sharing. And then he just said, where have you been? What, you know, why am I only just discovering this now in his 50s? And I said, it's never too late.
Because that's exactly when he was supposed to, because that is absolute, you know, that is divine. Yeah. I know that one of the houses is the Shalom House here in Perth, where they actually do that. And that's very, very special work. And, you know, only some people can do that. But, you know, what I really want to say, like if I was to come to you now and I was to say to you right now, you know, this is my situation. You know, I am a very, very gifted coach and healer like yourself. And I've been working with people for many, many, many years. And I feel that spirit has taken me onto a different journey, but it doesn't change anything. I am still the same person as, you know, I was. So, you know, I find myself, because I think authenticity is really important. And, you know, if you are grieving, I know that there is a specific person in the coaching online space, and her husband is going through exactly almost what, and it could be worse in fact, what my husband is going through. But all I see when I open up social media is, and I've got so much respect for this woman, is I see her on stages. I see her happy and joyous. I see her going on with life. And at first because my passion is so great, I thought to myself, the thousands of people that you're impacting know what's happened to your husband, because he is such a high-level spiritual influencer among thousands and thousands of people. How can you possibly show up like nothing has happened? And
guess what he would have wanted for her.
Yeah, I got a conviction on that. I got a conviction to say, you know, this is part of her journey, and she probably has embraced it better than I have currently embraced it. So if I was going to ask you the question of, you know, my journey, and, you know, as a person who has helped people for a very, very long time, and I'm now creating some amazing coaches with acquisition and things like that. And then I've got this element that, you know, that's going on. Do you need to channel Anya to be able to, I guess, give me some insight? Or is it something you can do with Lisa?
Yeah, it's probably easier if I just bring her through and then she can give you a direct response. So I'll just take a moment to bring Anya through.
So just for viewers and listeners, Lisa is currently going to move into a realm of spiritual and divine gift mix where she can call upon her spiritual guide that can come through her.
Yes, we're here. We would like to clarify and have a few questions for you, Terri. So when you feel into the energy and the frequency of your marriage, would it be correct in assuming that it is founded on a basis of love?
It is definitely the original source is definitely love. In fact, it's love like I've never really experienced before.
And then if we take another tact and we move into a different experience of your life, would it be correct in assuming or asking you whether you love the work that you present to the world and you love bringing people into new markets and new understandings and awareness as to how hypnotherapy and excelling self can benefit them and others?
I absolutely find, Anya, that, you know, in fact, one of the things is when I do move into the realm of helping people, that's when my frequency rises. In fact, if I get caught up in my human grief, I find that does lower my frequency.
Yes. And part of the human experience is to feel all range of emotions. Yes. So there are no emotions that we do not wish you to experience. What we wish you to have is a diversified experience. So therefore, we would not suggest it would be beneficial for you to sit entirely in your grief, because it would be as if you would be swallowed up by that if you allowed yourself to be consumed by purely the grief. Nor is it beneficial for you to work yourself to the bone that you therefore deny yourself the feelings. So on the extremes, we've got immersing yourself totally in the experience of the physical slow departure of your husband, as we're reframing words that you've used yourself. And on the other side of it, if you work to the extreme where you are avoiding the emotions, that is on the other side, the other extreme. Where we feel you will experience the most benefit is having a fluid blending between both, where you're able to move gently between honoring the self and honoring that human aspect and bringing your spiritual counterpart to that part of you that feels like you're in those vulnerable moments of desperation when your heart just pours out and you can't stop the crying and you just feel like you sink and surrender into that moment. And there you will be met by your loving force. There you will be met by that aspect of self that loves you unconditionally, that is there to be present, not to change, not to suppress, just to be present in acceptance of all that you're experiencing in the human dimension. Yes. And then on the other side of it is fueling the passion and the love and the connection, and knowing that every human that you interact with, where you're bringing them into an empowered state, as you're in that vibration of assisting another, do not recognize that you are also assisting yourself. As you empower another, you too are empowered in your own experience. So we do see that there can be judgment from others as to whether you should or shouldn't experience grief, or how much time you should or shouldn't experience with your husband, or how much time you should or shouldn't work, or there is always going to be mass opinions, yes, as to what it is you're doing and how you conduct your life. But we suggest that the most important opinion is that of your own. That one where you can determine for yourself how long you spend with your husband, how many moments you feel you're in resonance with him. That may be in a particular week where he has greater needs. You may shuttle work down and spend an entire week with your husband. And then when he's in a place where he's feeling more in alignment and feeling like he's okay in the physical and not as needy for your attention, that you're then able to push back into work. And there is, we see it, a movement and a flow that exists in nature. There's a cylindrical nature. There's an experience where you'll know within yourself in the moment what is right for you. And giving yourself that freedom to experience the diversity is where you'll gain the greatest learning from the experiences that you're coming through. Not only that, it's the ability to feel that love and compassion for others whom will have had and therefore experienced grief, brings the collective together. It brings the collective together in harmony, because when you have been to the depths of sorrow in your own experience, you too have an ability to understand and hold space for another. And more so when you've brought the love of your own inner being to nurture that wounded heart in the moment, then, and you've experienced and allowed that moment, that transition to take place from you to you. You understand what we're saying? Your powerful being to your human powerful being. In that moment when there's that surrender and that receiving, once you've experienced that for yourself, you're then able to share that with others. Does that make sense? And we are forward tracking the experience is rich and diverse. It is not, it is all beautiful from our present awareness. How could we see anything but the human existence in all its beauty, in all its connection, in all its love? Lisa remembers when she worked at Starlight, what she noticed most through the grief and the pain and the children that were, with serious illness, was how the community came together to help one another. The families that would bring food when others were going through, medical procedures, and the love and compassion and connection that was felt with families, some that were going through those perceived darkest experiences, experienced the most amount of love, right? Because there was a need for it. So therefore it comes in response to that need. So we feel that everything that you're doing is in resonance in the way that we perceive it. And we know you know this. You feel it. Yes, you feel it.
Yes.
Helpful?
Oh my gosh, I can see this complete golden aura that has come through, and my goodness, that was profound. And I just want to say to people out there that are listening to this, that when you can come into this place and this space with Lisa and Anya, which is the spiritual guide that comes through, that is when you came to life, Lisa. That is what I saw you light up. That is what I saw move you into flow. And that you can't make that stuff up. You cannot fake that, because you are in your element. You are in your gift. And you know what? Everything you said to me was profound. And Ian said in his glimpses of consciousness, as you put it in the first instance with me when I sat in the session, he said, this is a renewal. This is about a renewal of family coming together. And he saw that. And you actually just picked everything that is in the spiritual realm that I may have been blocking out, but you've just brought it into empowerment. So guys, can I just say to you, imagine if you are in a place and a space of just uncertainty. Because if you are in a place and a space of uncertainty, that can really block where you want to go and what you want to become. So when you can come into something like this where, I've seen Esther Hicks become Abraham Hicks, and Lisa was every bit as gifted in that place and that space, and yet Lisa is so humble. She's such a humble human being. So I say,
Very
in
human.
element, you're just humble, and this is the best time to come into Lisa's portal. So as you can see, I'm on this transmission on a recording with Lisa that is across the screen, and it was profound. So you too can actually have that same experience. Lisa, I have one more question before we actually conclude this beautiful time together. And that is that I always love to ask this question to all my guests, because it's at this place that usually they come out. And if the podcast started from here, you know, you can only imagine where it would lead to. So if you had anything that you want to share with that client, that person, that person that is really almost praying, even unwittingly and unconsciously, for someone like you, if you had words of wisdom to speak to the audience, what would you say?
You're not alone. You're not alone. And love abounds. There really is only love. Look for it. Look for it in nature. Look for it in your animals. Look for it in your friends and family. Unfortunately, what we do when we're in states of pain is we retreat. We retreat, and then we listen to the critical mind, and the mind goes on loops. And sometimes it can be hard to get off that negativity when we succumb to it. I almost feel like, you know, when I look at it from the hypnotherapy side, it's almost like that train gains momentum, and it's hard to get off it. And sometimes we just have to have help. We can't always do it on our own. I certainly haven't. I don't, you know, I've been through burnout and grief, and, you know, I've gone and seen a psychologist, and I've gone and seen healers and hypnotherapists myself. And I think we all need sometimes to just be in the presence of love and someone else to just raise our vibration just by being in that presence. And also to learn how to access that power internally, because I believe that we need each other. We're not alone, but we also need to learn how to trust that inner magic and that inner wisdom, because we're so often taught to look outside of ourselves, and we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our innate knowing. And I really would love to move people more back to that space of self-love, self-empowerment, self-trust, and then taking the best of ourselves and really connecting with one another. And when we do that, the world would just become so enriched.
I love that. And I trust that if you were meant to hear this, you are sitting right here, right now, listening to these words of wisdom. And we're going to drop Lisa's contact details in the show notes. So make sure you go into the show notes, you contact Lisa. And it may be that you require to listen to this again to really feel into that spiritual, you know, zone, or even into your own intuition as a human being, to ask yourself the question, am I going to be empowered as a result of coming into the self-love that Lisa believes in, and the self-awareness that she brings to the table, and this incredible gift. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I can't wait to continue this wonderful journey with you.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I love your body of work as well, and I love everything that you represent, Terri. Together we are making changes and we're empowering people, so keep up the great work too.
Thank you very much. See you and stay awesome.